I sourced this mostly from United States v. Honken, 2008, it's pretty much copy and paste, with very few edits, sources below. His first appeal is also mentioned, just for background, and also sourced. I also used the Des Moines Register, twice, also inked below for Honken's background. And his execution. I'll put the Wikipedia article for those who want to read it pretty much all together. That's where I found my sources, but I didn't copy directly from it. You can also see more from Angela, his accomplice. If you are interested in the case, I recommend checking the links below. Born into a life of uncertainty, Honken grew up in Britt, a small town west of Mason City in north-central Iowa. His father, a drunken schemer, after convincing Honken, then a recent high school graduate, to steal and copy the key to a local bank, his father robbed it. A second bank robbery would land him in prison. From Honken vs. United States, I'll put on the following quote. Movement is Dustin Honken. The movement's parents divorced when he was age 8, and following the divorce the movement remained with his mother in Britt, Iowa. His mother married Ron Smith approximately 18 months later. The movement, his mother and stepfather remained in Britt, where his mother has been employed at a local bank for 17 years and his stepfather owns a used car lot. According to the movement, and his mother, Jim Honken, is a chronic alcoholic and rarely works. Despite his father's alcohol abuse, the movement maintains he has a good relationship with him when his father is sober. Although the movement's parents separated when he was at a young age, he describes his childhood upbringing as good. He reported he was never abused or neglected and advised he had a good relationship with his mother and stepfather. The movement described his mother as perfect. A classic dweeb, Honken had the smarts to back up the look. Oriented toward math and science, he was an eloquent writer, too. Earning a scholarship to North Iowa Area Community College in 1991, he dreamed of becoming a pharmaceutical lawyer. Before starting at North Iowa, Honken fell into selling marijuana and cocaine, quickly building a list of customers who paid thousands for their fix. Honken and his best friend, Timothy Cutcomb, began manufacturing methamphetamine in Arizona in 1992. Honken distributed his methamphetamine to only two dealers, Greg Nicholson, and Terry DeGois. Honken became acquainted with DeGois's then-girlfriend, Johnson, in 1993, and the two promptly began a romantic relationship. Johnson became pregnant with Honken's child later that year. In March 1993, law enforcement began investigating Nicholson. After officers searched Nicholson's house, Nicholson decided to cooperate in the investigation. On March 21, 1993, officers arranged a recorded meeting between Nicholson and Honken at Nicholson's home in Iowa, during which the two discussed methamphetamine and Nicholson paid Honken $3,000 for past deliveries. That same day, officers arrested Honken and Cutcomb. Honken moved from Arizona to Mason City after his arrest. Honken was initially charged with state drug offenses. After Nicholson testified before a federal grand jury in April 1993, the grand jury indicted Honken for conspiracy to manufacture methamphetamine, and the state charges were dismissed in favor of federal charges. Honken notified the court he intended to plead guilty, and a plea hearing was scheduled for July 30, 1993. Honken was released on bond. During June and July 1993, Honken and Johnson searched for Nicholson, often asking Johnson's friend, Christy Gaubitz, to babysit Johnson's daughter while they searched. On July 7, 1993, Johnson purchased a 9mm handgun. Meanwhile, in mid-July 1993, a mutual friend introduced Nicholson to Lori Duncan. Duncan was a single, working mother raising her two girls, Candy, age 10, and Amber, age 6. Nicholson began staying at Duncan's house. On the night of July 24, 1993, Honken and Johnson again asked Gaubitz to babysit Johnson's daughter and borrowed Gaubitz's car so they could search for Nicholson. Honken and Johnson normally returned about midnight, but on this occasion they did not come home until around 5 o'clock in the morning. On July 25, 1993, Nicholson, Duncan, Candy, and Amber suddenly disappeared. 5 days later, on July 30, 1993, Honken appeared for his plea hearing, but declined to plead guilty. Honken told his attorney he heard a rumor Nicholson had skipped town. Honken also provided his attorney with a VHS tape of Nicholson saying Honken was not guilty of the charges against him. Around August 2, 1993, the government learned Nicholson was missing after warrants were issued for Nicholson's arrest and officers were unsuccessful in locating Nicholson. The government continued its drug investigation against Honken, now turning its attention to Honken's only other dealer, DeGois. Honken told CutComp he was worried about DeGois testifying against him. DeGois disappeared on November 5, 1993. The night of his disappearance, DeGois dropped his 10-year-old daughter off at his mother's house and told his mother he was going to meet Johnson, his former girlfriend. DeGois said he would return shortly to pick up his daughter that evening, but DeGois never returned. In the winter of 1993 to 1994, while cleaning a bedroom closet, Galbutz discovered a large black handgun with attached silencer in a cosmetics bag belonging to Johnson. Galbutz called Johnson to demand Johnson remove the gun. Johnson told Galbutz not to worry about the gun because Honken would take care of it. That winter, Honken went to CutComp for assistance destroying a large black pistol. Honken and CutComp used a torch to cut and melt the gun into a number of unrecognizable pieces, which they discarded in ditches along a country road. While the 1993 charges against him were pending, Honken continued his methamphetamine manufacturing efforts. Honken built a complex methamphetamine laboratory and took significant steps toward manufacturing methamphetamine. Because Nicholson and DeGois could not be found, the court dismissed the 1993 charges against Honken for lack of prosecution. In the fall of 1995, Honken recruited Dan Cobain, to help him manufacture methamphetamine. Unbeknownst to Honken, Cobain went to police and began cooperating. With Cobain's assistance, police began an undercover investigation, and on February 7, 1996, officers executed a search warrant at Honken's house. Officers seized a methamphetamine laboratory, chemicals, and equipment, as well as paper notes and books on manufacturing drugs and how to bind and gag prisoners. Honken was charged. While the 1996 charges were pending, Honken plotted to murder Cobain, and certain police officers and chemists, and to destroy evidence against him. At this point, CutComp decided to cooperate with police. CutComp wore a wire and recorded numerous hours of conversations in which Honken referenced eliminating witnesses in 1993, and described his plan to evade the current charges by killing witnesses and officers. Based upon these tapes, the court revoked Honken's pre-trial release and detained him in the Woodbury County Jail in Sioux City, Iowa. While incarcerated, Honken admitted to other inmates he killed witnesses to avoid earlier charges. Honken went into great detail about the murders. Honken also began planning the murders of Cobain and CutComp, instructing a fellow inmate to kill CutComp and providing directions to CutComp's house. Together with another inmate, Honken attempted to escape by breaking a hole in the wall of a cell and arranging for Johnson to deliver a hacksaw and rope. Jailers discovered the hole and foiled the escape plot. On June 2, 1997, Honken pled guilty to the drug charges and was ultimately sentenced to 324 months, 27 years, in prison. In 2000, Galbutz decided to cooperate in the ongoing murder investigation, telling officers about Honken's and Johnson's search for Nicholson, and about Galbutz's later discovery of the gun in her closet. At trial, Honken stipulated, while in the Benton County Jail, Johnson became acquainted with Robert McNeese, a federal prisoner serving a life sentence for an unrelated offense. Johnson and McNeese discussed Johnson's case. As a ruse, McNeese told Johnson she could escape responsibility for the murders if McNeese could arrange to have another inmate who was already serving a life sentence falsely claim responsibility for murdering the 5 victims. McNeese told Johnson that in order to make the confession believable, the other inmate would need to be able to furnish proof of his involvement by leading authorities to the victims' bodies. Johnson prepared and provided McNeese with maps and notes describing the locations where the 5 bodies were buried. McNeese turned the maps and notes over to law enforcement. Using the maps Johnson drew, officers discovered the bodies of Nicholson and the Duncan family, buried in a single hole located in a wooded area outside Mason City. Candy and Amber each had a single bullet hole in the back of their heads. Nicholson and Duncan were bound, gagged, and shot multiple times, including once in the head. DeGois's body was found in a field a few miles away, face down in a shallow hole. DeGois had been shot 1 or more times, and his skull was severely fragmented, requiring significant reconstruction. Honken was sent to the United States Penitentiary at Florence, Colorado, where he became convinced he would be charged with the murders. If tried for the murders, Honken planned to call his associates as witnesses in Sioux City, and then overpower and kill the guards and escape. After escaping, Honken intended to murder witnesses, law enforcement officers, and a federal prosecutor. To prepare for their escape, Honken and his associates practiced retrieving an officer's weapon, learning how to remove handcuffs with minimal tools, and training in martial arts scenarios centering around encounters with an armed escort. Honken was charged with the murders on August 30, 2001, and his trial began in August 2004. Concluding Honken posed a serious security risk due to his prior escape attempts and threats against witnesses and officials connected with his trial, the district court ordered Honken to wear a stun belt and be shackled and bolted to the floor during his trial. To minimize potential prejudice to Honken, the district court ordered that Honken not be moved in the presence of the jury, that table skirts be placed on counsel table so jurors would not see the shackles, that the shackles be fitted with sufficient chain to allow Honken to move naturally, and that the shackles make no noticeable noise. The government presented 54 witnesses, over 300 exhibits, and 13 days of trial testimony. On October 14, 2004, the jury found Honken guilty of all 17 counts. The jury returned its penalty phase verdict on October 27, 2004, voting to impose the death penalty for Candy's and Amber's murders, and life imprisonment for the Nicholson, Duncan, and DeGois murders.